Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of Kamen Rider Ex-Aid episode 19. Now I don't have Geodra anymore to have the second number like line up within one of Ex-Aid to help me remember either one, because it's on Q Ranger episode 2 now, so it's a mess really when we think about it. Anyway, so episode 19 was actually pretty decent. It actually ended up being a Brave focus, which I actually say that like it's surprising, but it's not, considering they introduced Tattle Fantasy last week. But I mean, it was kind of cool the way they ended up using Emu's storyline to back that up. So we pick up where we left off, where, well, more or less, where Emu kind of went crazy from what Genom told him about having the virus, and he wakes up and he's basically like full on just the genius gamer personality, and he's just kind of this cocky gamer. It was like 100 bazillion % improvement on his normal personality. I don't know if I've ever made this clear in any video, but I don't like Emu at all. I think he's really annoying, and it's funny because I've talked about this before, but I feel like it comes off as me being a really like bad person, but maybe I am, but like not liking these positive characters. But it's not about them being positive, it's about it coming off as genuine. And the way him and like Takaru from last year came off, it doesn't come off as if they're actually good. Not to say that it's fake in the show, but it's like in the way the script is delivering it, it comes off as forced and not genuine. And honestly, in Emu's case, his, well, gotta protect the patient, I hate that guy. It honestly gets in the way of actual doing good. In multiple cases, his one-note persona with that gets in the way, where he'll actually get in the way of other characters doing good, or even in situations like early on when Snipe was doing something that actually would have been good and it would have benefited everybody, but even if he wasn't doing it for the right reasons, but then Emu would stop him. And so it gets in the way. And so I liked getting a break from that. I actually kind of liked his gamer persona. And it definitely leans a little bit too far on the don't even care about people as opposed to Emu cares too much. I think we need a balance in the middle. In fact, during this episode, I couldn't help but think how much cooler it would be if we didn't have the whole doctor thing. Because honestly, it's really stupid. Like when Emu was like, I'm gonna go fight, he's like, but you're not a doctor right now. That shouldn't matter. Like literally being a doctor, I know that that's the bit of like the gamer disease, but the skills that it takes to be a doctor have literally nothing to do with what happens when you're fighting as a rider, and that kind of bothers me when they bring that up. But I was thinking how much cooler it would be if either A, I think it would be me personally, not because I don't think it meshes, because Toku meshes things all the time, but if we just didn't have the doctor crap altogether and we're like fully focused on the game stuff, because that's when Ex-Aid excels, is when it's just about the game stuff. But I was actually just thinking, with the doctor stuff, what if like M wasn't a doctor and like everyone else around him was? And then it would be cool if he had this more persona, like a balance, where he was this sort of cocky gamer persona, and he cared about people, but he wasn't like obnoxious about it. And then you had like Brave, who was an actual doctor. Then there could have kind of been a cool give and take between them, where Brave would teach Emu to care about people a little bit more in a different way, in the way that the doctors would, because Brave would be approaching everything very clinically, and M could bring the sort of gaming strategies to everything, like the thinking differently, which was kind of an element in this episode when he went up against Gekitatsu Robot's boss, and despite being a lower level, his clever thinking helped him win, and then Brave used that later. And I was thinking, how cool would this be if M wasn't annoying and actually was like helping the others by thinking of gaming strategy, and then they helped him realize why doctors care about people, and then you still have the doctor element. But I don't know. This is all me just making my own fan fiction at this point. The point is, it could be so much cooler than it is, because everyone else right now is just annoying and like a generic character archetype. But so I liked that bit. Speaking of Gekitatsu Robots, I really like seeing it because it's my favorite level 3 form, and every time he's called upon level 3, it's been that weenie bike form. So it was nice to see that. Like I said, I liked Emu's personality. Unfortunately, at the end, he did snap back. It would have been cool to last one more episode. The main drive behind it was essentially with Emu acting selfish. Brave had to sort of step up and care for the patient a bit, and just sort of step up in general, even though he didn't have his Gashats. And what would have been the harm of him using Mighty Action X? That would have been just cool to see once. And also, when he pulled the Gashat out of his driver, why did Ex-Aid not de-transform? Like, Papu Poo Poo Head pulled out the 2 other Gashats earlier in the episode. That's pulling out the Gashat. That looks awkward. And he de-transformed. But then later Brave did it, and Ex-Aid stayed transformed for a long time. I don't know why. Maybe there's some sort of explanation that people yell at me in the comments like usual, but I don't know. That seems stupid. But I don't know what the harm would have been in Bokkensha in letting him transform. But it ended up being kind of cool because he sort of had to take center stage and think differently in order to sort of outsmart Tattle Fantasy since he didn't have powers, and then wound up getting it. And there was like a brief, like 4-second I've lost control bit before he came back in control of it. But I thought it was a cool debut for that form, even though I think the name of it is the dorkiest of all time. But the build up to it as far as Hero's character, and then actually seeing the form was very cool. It's a pretty cool form, some cool fights going along with it. So I thought it was a good build up and a good, like a decent little mini arc for Hero and sort of showing his progress. And that sort of goes back to something I talked about in the beginning reviews of the series, is that I had hoped that both Hero and Emu would rub off on each other in terms of their approaches, and it's clear that Emu's did a little bit, especially with Brave seeing in this episode that a bit of Emu's approach was necessary. I would just hope that, which I doubt that they're going to do it, but I would love for them to do the same for Emu later, because Brave's approach has value too. Emu thinks about it too much about the patient, whereas Brave, I think that Emu should find value in his approach of just, let's just solve it. Then we don't even have to worry about the patient for more than a few seconds. If we just solve it, then they're better, then you worry about their problems, you know? And I like to show them both affecting each other instead of making it seem like Emu's is the only way, which it's not. But at least it showed a little growth for Hero, which was nice, even though he's still just kind of that generic archetype, which is my problem with the show right now. It's like everyone's just a really generic archetype, and we're using like the same 5 generic plot points that we've always used, but they're just in a different order. And because it's got a shiny packaging, everyone thinks it's really great, but it's kind of not. Like, it's very okay. But anyway, that's for another time. But I thought it was good for this episode. It was a good debut for Tattle Fantasy. Good build up to it, both for his character and just for the form coming off of last week, which was nice. And next week it looks like we're getting the Captain Sham form. I know it's the same Gasha, you just twist it. But it would have been nice to have just a buffer in between, just because it kind of takes away from sort of the impact of this form when all of a sudden next week Snipe's going to be using it, but hey. But overall, this was a decent episode. I like the stuff they did with Emu. I like the stuff they did with Brave. Even though it's Snipe's debut thing next week, I definitely hope we start tackling Emu stuff head on next week, because it made sense that it was kind of not in the background of this episode, but that you know, we had to go through the whole getting his regular personality back in this episode, and then use it for Brave, which was a great use of it. But if we somehow ignore it next week to prop up Snipe completely, it'll be awkward to not address it. Kind of like the way they weren't addressing why the Emu was being attacked. Not why they were doing it, but like Emu never really fully addressed it, except for the one time. And so it's awkward when they table these things. So I just hope it's not tabled next week. Speaking of, they kind of assumed in this episode that the M persona was the Bugster, and I'm still holding out hope that his punk whiner persona is the Bugster, because I think that would be at least an interesting twist. But yeah, anyway, let's end it off. Overall, decent episode. I'd probably give it a 7.7. But anyway, until next time, make sure to read these podcasts at writersrangerambles.com, and of course, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, Dawson Ryder, signing out.